Welcome back. I'm Dave, the owner of Marine Craft. I'd like to talk to you guys today a little bit about some common things that we see with electrical wiring and what those indications may mean if you see them on your boat, and maybe a little bit on how to initially troubleshoot some of those. So if you ever experience dim lights or flickering lights, or maybe your electronics at the helm will go out momentarily and then come right back, and it doesn't happen consistently, so it's not like it happens every hour or anything, but every 3 months you're on your boat you might see something like this. And that's usually an indication of maybe an intermittent short, where the boat moves a certain way and then all of a sudden your electronics go out and moves back into place, and now your electronics come back. That could be one of the things. It could be something as simple as a loose screw that's holding down a ring terminal on your power supply. There's a few things there that can be indications of it, and I know it's not always an emergency, so if you're underway and your lights dim real quick and then come back, most people will kind of forget about that by the time they make it into their anchorage or whatever and start troubleshooting those. But it can be an indication of some things that may be wrong, and maybe you just need to clean up and tighten some things up. Also, if you have hot spots or you smell burning electronics, that's usually something that you should address pretty quickly. So when we do all of our electrical upgrades or installs, we have a FLIR gun, and what we'll do is we'll go back to check ourselves. We'll power up the system, tax it pretty good, just like you would if you were underway, and then we use the FLIR gun to look at all the wires, all the terminals that we've installed, to make sure that there's no hot spots. Nothing should be abnormally hot. Because if you see that, that's an indication of maybe a bad crimp, maybe the lug is not set perfectly, because especially when you're dealing with high amperage stuff, if this is your bus bar surface, right, and it's nice and flat, but your terminal is at an angle, and that could be just because the heat shrink is here, popping it up a little bit. Now the load that should be dispersed between the entire ring terminal is now dispersed on the point of the ring terminal, and all that power is trying to go through that little point instead of that flat surface, so you're going to get hot spots, so you need to correct that. Burning wire, this could be usually like a short indication, so maybe the two wires have a chafe point and they're touching just intermittently. It's not necessarily enough to blow the fuse or circuit breaker, but it could be enough to over time just generate enough heat, and now you're smelling that. And you definitely should address that as soon as possible, because we don't want that to turn into a bigger fire while you're on your boat. Something else you might see, especially over time, is batteries won't hold a charge, or they seem to discharge a whole lot quicker than what you may remember. So as batteries age, their capacity diminishes. So a 100 amp hour battery, after 5 years, you may only realistically get 70 amps, 60 amps out of that. And it's hard to diagnose simply by looking at the voltage. You really need to test your batteries with a good battery tester. And when you find that out, then you can decide if you can use the batteries any further or if you need to replace them. Speaking of batteries and other terminals too, if you see corrosion or like a green hue on some of the terminals, you definitely need to address that whenever you have time and clean those up. So you'll most likely see this around battery terminals, unless you have some abnormal situation where, like, maybe you have a lot of salt water in your bilge for a little bit, and that salt spray or air gets on whatever electrical terminals you have in your bilge. Then what can happen is that those can start to corrode a little bit quicker. But more often than not, when you see corrosion around terminals, it's going to be on lead acid batteries. It's just kind of the nature of them. As they off-gas, sometimes that gas surrounds those terminals and they start getting corroded and green much quicker than any other electrical connection you might have on your boat. If you do see tripping breakers or fuses being blown, it's not completely uncommon to have something trip on you every once in a while. But if it's consistent and it happens more than once, there's definitely a problem there, and we need to address that. You might see that in situations like, let's say you take a microwave that you buy at a home improvement store and you throw it on your boat, and over years that microwave will start to degrade a little bit, and as it degrades, it requires more amperage to actually work to full capacity. So when you're really taxing that microwave or that electric oven that is old, it's going to require more amperage, and it may exceed the amperage of your circuit. So it may be something like that, or it could be a short or any number of other electrical problems in that circuit somewhere that we need to address if you're routinely tripping fuses or circuit breakers. So if you have a good multimeter and you're familiar with how to use that, that can usually get you in the right direction for fixing most of these problems here. So become familiar with that, learn how to troubleshoot that, have a general understanding of how your electrical system does work, so that if you have a problem underway, you can kind of start addressing that. But if you ever have any questions, or you're looking for ABYC certified repairs or world-class upgrades, be sure to give Marinecraft a call. We'd be happy to help you out. We'll see you guys out on the water.